Mara Voss had a system. Every morning, she woke at 5:15, made 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, one she let go cold, because Calder was always already gone, and sat at the kitchen table for exactly 11 minutes. She counted ceiling tiles. She breathed. She pressed whatever was moving beneath her ribs back down into the quiet place she had built for it over 20 years, the way you press a lid onto something that has been simmering too long. Then she drove to the school, unlocked the clinic, and took care of other people's children. It was a good life. She meant that without irony. She had learned, somewhere around year 8 of her marriage, that a good life and a true life were not always the same thing, and that most people chose the good one, and that this choice was not weakness. It was just the particular math of survival. The gathering notice came on a Tuesday. Calder set it on the kitchen counter the way he set everything down, with total certainty, as if objects arranged themselves according to his intentions. He was a tall man, and the kitchen had always felt smaller with him in it. Not unpleasantly, just smaller. "They moved it to our land this year," he said. He was already checking his phone. "Good for the pack, less travel." Mara looked at the paper. She said, "That's nice." She smoothed her left sleeve. He kissed her cheek, and he smelled like cold iron and pine, and she watched him leave through the glass door, and then she stood at the counter for a long time looking at the gathering notice, the way a person looks at something they have been expecting for years, and still somehow did not prepare for. She moved the paper under the fruit bowl. She drove to work. The gathering began on a Friday evening, which was the worst possible evening for it, because Friday evenings in a school clinic meant the last round of ice packs and permission slips, and a boy named Danny who had, for the 3rd week in a row, convinced himself he was having a heart attack when he was actually afraid of the weekend. Mara sat with Danny for 20 minutes. She told him that the body sometimes turned fear into symptoms, because fear had to live somewhere. Danny said that sounded made up. Mara said most true things sounded made up at first. She got home at 6:45. 200 wolves were already on her property. The fires were lit along the back field, and the sound was low and collective, the particular sound a large group of people make when they all belong to the same thing and they know it. She had attended 17 gatherings in her life as Calder's wife. She had learned to move through them the way water moves over stone, present, touching everything, leaving no mark. Someone named Bren, a senior pack member with a white beard and very direct eyes, found her near the refreshment table. "No shift last gathering either," he said, not unkindly, the way older people sometimes state facts they believe are harmless. Mara smiled. "I'm a late bloomer." Bren laughed. She had delivered that line so many times that it came out perfectly, easy and self-deprecating and finished, like a door that opened and closed in the same motion, letting nothing through. She had been closing that door for 2 decades. She refilled her cup and moved on. The young girl's name was Petra. She was 17, maybe younger, with the kind of face that had not yet decided what it wanted to be, still halfway between a girl and whoever she was becoming. She had been nervous all evening. Mara noticed, because Mara noticed everything, which was one of the less convenient things about being who she was. At 9:40, near the far fire, Petra shifted for the first time. It was not dramatic in the way people imagined it would be. It never was. There was a sound and a movement, and then there was a wolf where the girl had been, pale and shaking, and absolutely alive in a way that the girl had only been approximating before. The crowd made a warm sound. Someone cheered. Someone else pulled the girl's mother forward. Petra cried, not from pain. She cried the way a person cries when they have been holding something in for so long that the release itself is physical, a whole-body event, something the lungs have to participate in. Mara watched from across the fire. Calder found her, the way he always found her in a crowd, with the ease of a man who had never once lost track of something he considered his. He put his arm around her shoulders. He was warm and solid, and he pulled her slightly toward him in the particular way that meant he was being kind. "Must be hard to watch," he said, quietly. He meant it with total sincerity. He believed he understood what she felt. He had believed this for 20 years, and he had been so genuinely, structurally wrong that there was no version of correcting him that did not also dismantle the entire architecture of their life together. She looked at Petra's mother crying into her daughter's fur. She said, "Yes." She said it the way she said most things, carefully, accurately, with only the part of the truth that fit through the door she kept open. Calder went to speak with Bren. Mara set her cup down on a nearby table. She walked toward the tree line. She did not decide to do it. This is important, and it is the part that would be hardest to explain to anyone who had not spent 20 years becoming very good at not doing something. There was no decision. There was just the moment when the part of her that had been pressing the lid down for 2 decades simply stopped pressing. The way you stop holding your breath not because you chose to exhale, but because the body, eventually, insists. The trees accepted her. The noise of the gathering fell behind her. She walked until the firelight was only a suggestion between the branches, and then she stood still, and the wolf did not surge up out of her, the way it did for Petra, violent and glorious and new. It arrived the way a tide arrives, without hurry, with complete authority. The way things move when they have been patient long enough that patience is no longer the word for it. She let it come. The clearing was dark, and very cold, and completely quiet. What the shift revealed was this: a wolf that has been compressed for 20 years does not emerge as a small thing. The body remembers everything it was not allowed to be. All of it comes back at once. She stood in the clearing for a moment. Just stood there, being what she had always been. Calder came through the trees at the eastern edge of the clearing. Of course he had followed her. He was the Alpha King, and this was his land, and he had spent 51 years being a man who followed anything that moved in territory he was responsible for. It was not a character flaw, it was simply the thing he was. She had always known this about him. He stopped at the tree line. His feet stopped first, the way a person stops when something ahead of them sends a signal that bypasses thinking entirely and lands somewhere older, somewhere the body keeps below language. He looked at the wolf in his clearing. His wolf, the ancient, instinct-driven thing that lived below Calder the husband, below Calder the king, below every careful word he had ever spoken, read what was standing in the clearing and performed one single involuntary act. His knees dropped. Not slowly, not dramatically, just down. The way a bow is not a choice. The way a compass needle is not choosing north. Mara watched him. She was still and enormous and patient, and she watched Calder the Alpha King kneel in the dirt of his own territory with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It was not fear. It was not even awe exactly. It was the expression of a man whose entire understanding of a situation has just been replaced, in real time, with a different and much larger understanding. She shifted back. The cold hit her immediately. She found her clothes where she had left them folded at the base of a pine tree. She had planned this part at least. She had planned this part for years, and she dressed in the dark with her back to him, and she did not hurry. When she turned around, he was still on the ground. She walked toward him. She was not angry. This is important too. She had made peace with the anger, somewhere around year 12, had felt it fully, had set it down, had chosen the life she built with the quiet, and the ceiling tiles, and the school clinic, and Danny, who was afraid of the weekend. She had chosen it. She was not a victim of her own choices. She stood in front of him. He looked up at her, and his eyes were doing something she had no word for. She said, "I was never afraid of you." She let that sit. "I was afraid of this." She moved her hand between them, a small gesture that meant the pack, the land, the title, the decades, all of it. The entire structure they had built together on a foundation that was accurate in every detail except one. "I was afraid of what you would do with it, what the pack would do, whether you would be able to look at me the same way." Calder said nothing. She crouched down so they were at the same level. The pine needles were cold under her feet. "When I was 18, she said, there was a girl in the pack I grew up in. She was high-ranked, powerful, not in the way that made people comfortable, in the way that made people afraid, the kind of afraid that turns into anger, and then into something worse." She paused. "I watched what happened to her, and then I decided not to be her." She said it simply. One sentence, no elaboration. The weight of it sat in the space between them, and she did not fill the space with more words, because more words would have made it smaller. Calder's voice, when it came, was very quiet. 20 years. Yes. You carried this for 20 years. Yes. He was quiet again. He was looking at his hands in the dirt, and she watched him working through it. Not the betrayal, which she expected him to reach for, and which she was prepared for, but something more complicated, something that involved his entire understanding of himself as a man who knew his wife, and who was discovering, in a cold clearing at nearly 10 o'clock at night, that knowing and seeing are not the same thing. Did you ever? He stopped, started again. Did you want to tell me? Mara thought about this honestly. Many times, she said. And then I would watch you in a meeting with the pack, and you would make a decision, and it would be a good decision, and everyone would listen to you, because you were the alpha, and that was the correct order of things. And I understood that what I was would not fit into the correct order of things. He made a sound that was not quite a word. Not because of you specifically, she said. That's not what I mean. I mean because of the shape of the world we were in. The shape didn't have room. A long silence. The gathering was still audible at the edge of the trees, low and warm and unaware. Calder looked up at her. What rank, he said, carefully, are you? Mara looked at him for a moment. She said, Your wolf already knows. He closed his eyes. She watched him absorb this. She watched him take the 20 years they had together and examine them from the new angle that this information provided. The way you might turn a photograph and realize that what you thought was the background was actually the subject. She watched him understand that their marriage was not a different thing than he had believed. It was the same thing, seen truly for the first time. He opened his eyes. I would not have been afraid of you, he said. Mara smiled. It was the smile that came when something was both true and not enough. You don't know that, she said, gently. I do. Calder. She said his name the way she said it when she wanted him to actually hear her, which was a different way from the other times. You spent 20 years assuming that you were protecting me, because that was the story. The powerful one protects the quiet one. That story was comfortable. It worked. We were happy in it. She paused. If I had shifted on the first night of our first gathering, you would have been a different kind of husband. And I don't know what kind. I only know it would have been different. And I wasn't willing to risk losing what we had. He was quiet for a long time. The cold settled around them. And now, he said. She stood up. She offered him her hand. Not to help him up, just offered it. The way you offer something when the old terms are done and the new terms have not been written yet. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He took it. He got to his feet slowly, and he was taller than her, and had always been taller than her, and this had never been the most important thing about him, but she noticed it now differently, the way she would notice everything about him differently from this point, and she understood that he was doing the same with her. They stood in the clearing. Neither of them spoke. 200 wolves on the other side of the trees, a whole gathering of the pack going on without them, the fires burning, Petra learning what it felt like to finally be something she had always been, and here, in the dark, a woman who had pressed a lid down for 20 years with one hand, and a man who was just now understanding what the other hand had been holding. He did not ask her what happened next. She did not tell him. They stood there together in the clearing, and the cold was sharp, and the night was very still, and there was no answer yet for what they were to each other now. But there was this, his hand and her hand, the same as it had been for 20 years, and also completely, quietly, for the very first time, equal.